I'm here for Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts webinar series. We have a great topic today as we head into summer, and one of our favorite speakers, Dr. Randy Coleman, back with us to address the topic of summer screen limits and learning. How do you use apps and games to build social skills, creativity, and fitness? I think it's safe to say that parents of kids with ADHD face the unstructured days of summer with, in many cases, absolute trepidation. And the question that raises itself is, how do we set limits on screen time? Because left to their own devices, too many kids will go straight to video games. And in the face of the lure of digital media, how do we get our kids to take part in other activities? Reading, sports, friendships, family time, etc. So Randy Coleman's here today to talk to us about topics such as, why are kids with ADHD so consumed with digital media? What are the pros and cons of digital media and playing on digital devices for kids with ADHD? Why outdoor play and exercise is critical for kids with ADHD, and what technologies will actually encourage that? How you as a parent can identify games, apps, digital media that will encourage different kinds of play this summer. And finally, he's going to offer some tips on the big topic that we hear about at Attitude, which is how to manage my child's screen time. How much is too much? For those of you who haven't heard a Randy Coleman webinar in the past, let me introduce him. He is the founder and the president of Learning Works for Kids. It's a website written just the way it sounds, learningworksforkids.com. It's an educational technology company that specializes in using video games and digital media to teach kids executive functioning and academic skills. It's a great niche that Dr. Coleman has carved out for a useful function. He has been, for the last 30 years, he's been the clinical director of the South County Child and Family Consultants Company in Rhode Island. It's a private clinical practice that specializes in assessment and interventions for children with learning disabilities and attentional difficulties. He's the author of 2 books, which I recommend to you: Train Your Brain for Success, A Teenager's Guide to Executive Functioning, and Playing Smarter in a Digital World. Do check out the Learning Works for Kids website. I also want to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, the terrific Play Attention. PlayAttention.com. It's the only brain training system that combines both neurofeedback and cognitive training and to help improve attention, behavior, and learning skills in children and adults with ADHD. So thank you, Play Attention, and we urge all of you to check them out at playattention.com. Let me just tell you today that we're trying a new follow-on method, which we hope you'll all help us test out. And that is that we have set up a forum topic on the new AttitudeMag.com forums for this webinar, where those of you who are listening in can discuss the topics raised in this webinar, can post questions that might not have been answered at the end of it. And Randy Coleman has generously agreed to check out the posts that are on that topic and answer some questions over the next couple of days. So if you want to follow on to this topic after the end of this webinar, you'll have to create an account on the new AttitudeMag.com. You'll see a sign in, login in the header. Go to the Attitude forums and scroll down to webinars, and you'll find a topic just for today's webinar. So if you have unanswered questions, we invite you to post them there. During the webinar, as always, you can post the questions that you'd like Dr. Coleman to address during the webinar in the box on your screen. After he finishes his presentation, he'll address as many of those as he can. And as always, if you've got audio problems, the best solution is to dial in via the phone line. This is an internet connection webinar, and when the sound becomes wonky, that's the reason. So finally, also, as always, you'll find a replay of this webinar available on the Attitude website, attitudemag.com/webinar, no S, just webinar. And you'll also find this as an audio, as a podcast in the iTunes store in the ADHD Experts audio series. So with that, and our thanks, let me turn it over to Randy Coleman. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Wayne, and the rest of the Attitude staff for having me. I really enjoy coming to these webinars and talking about some of these issues. And I actually thought about this as a good webinar topic because I hear so often from parents that I work with in my clinical practice, what are they going to do in the summer when the kids want to spend all day playing video games? And the summertime really presents major challenges to parents of kids with ADHD to begin with, but also to parents of typically developing kids, because kids need something to do. So what I'm hoping today is that we'll cover a number of topics, and you can see this in the takeaway slide here. I want to talk a little bit about what makes games and technology so engaging for kids with ADHD. I want to make sure that you understand, no matter where you are on this issue, that digital play is here to stay. I mean, you've got to do something about it. You've got to deal with it in one way or another. If you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a clinician, you've got to know something about it. You have to do something about it. I want to make sure that we talk about how during the summer and really all year round, exercise is so important for kids with ADHD. And really, I'm going to connect that to how you can use technology and to encourage that. That I'm not going to, I'll give some research about the importance of exercise, but really how we can connect technology to exercise. I'll talk a little bit about some of the best games and apps for the summer. And what I mean by that is I want to talk about some of those skill sets that kids with ADHD need to be able to develop, and how the summer affords you the time and the opportunity to spend the energy, money, if necessary, and whatever else you need to do to make those things happen for these kids. And then lastly, we'll talk about controlling screen time. We'll talk about screen time limits. It's a big issue, one that, again, is important in the summer and all year round. So before we get into the meat of the topic, let's just talk a little bit about the importance of kids' play. I mean, this is how kids learn. I mean, this is you know, there are books titled "Play Equals Learning." Particularly for younger kids, it's the way that they learn. It's the way they learn. They copy people. They learn to share. They learn to do all kinds of things. It's really it's crucial for their social and emotional development. And in today's world, one part of play is clearly what we call digital play. At Learning Works for Kids, we talk about the importance of digital play. And when we first started Learning Works for Kids, probably 15 years ago, we primarily talked about kids playing video games on consoles. Well, digital play is totally different from that now. In fact, kids under the age of 8 spend most of their time, 65% of the time, in fact, watching YouTube videos. So that's their form of digital play. So digital play has become very, very different. Digital play is different because of the access to digital play. The average age of a child getting their first smartphone now is 10.3 years old. Can you imagine that? 10.3 years old. I remember holding off with my oldest child until he was 16 before he could have a dumb phone. Okay, nowadays kids at 10 years old are accessing the world through their phones. And essentially, kids are involved with technology. There's really no choice. The Kaiser Foundation has done some great studies. Common Sense Media did a recent study where they found that kids are spending between 6 and 9.5 hours per day on screens. Teenagers, 9.5 hours per day. It's a fascinating study. Check it out at Common Sense Media. So you don't have a choice if you're a parent or an educator or clinician. Kids are involved with technology. You got to do something about it. You got to understand it. You got to be finding ways to make it helpful for your kids. So, one of my favorite topics that I like to talk about, one of the things that I hear about in my office without asking ever, is Minecraft. Kids with ADHD, for some reason, really love Minecraft. Well, there are some real good reasons, actually. Part of it is the sandbox nature of the game. It's set in an open world, so you can do anything you want. And kids, when I ask kids with ADHD why do they love Minecraft so much, they mostly say, well, because I can do anything I want. There's not any particular rules that they can have. They don't have to have particular goals. They don't have to have a particular direction to go. They can discover things. They can construct things. They learn things. It's easy to get better at Minecraft, so they feel good about that. They can be creative. They have some control over things. Minecraft is also fantastic for kids with ADHD and kids on the spectrum because they can share it with others. They can play it with others, which is true for many games. But one of the things about Minecraft is kids love to talk about it. They love to demonstrate to their friends what they're doing with it. They also love watching Let's Plays, those videos that your kids are going onto YouTube and watching other people play Minecraft and other games. They love watching those things, and they share those with their friends as well, so that all the kids seem to know about that kind of stuff. So Minecraft is a great example, I think, of why kids with ADHD love video games. So there are a lot of other reasons that kids love video games. One of the things that we talk about at the Learning Works for Kids website is the idea of engagement, and that's now. So it's and keep in mind, I'm not talking about engagement. I'm talking about engagement. It's got an M in there. And when we talk about engagement, we're talking about this cognitive and emotional immersion in the game. You've seen it with your kids. It's like you know, they're in the game. They're in the moment. It amplifies their focus. I mean, it amplifies their willingness to persist and to engage in tasks. I can't tell you how many hundreds, maybe thousands of parents who have come to see me for neuropsychological evaluations who say to me, well, the school referred Johnny for an evaluation. They think he's got ADHD, but you should see him play video games. He's totally focused. We can't take his attention away from that. And that's, in fact, actually how I got interested in this to begin with 20 years ago. When I kept hearing that time and time again, I began asking myself, how are we going to take this immersion in games, this what I later called engagement, and use it to help kids to learn skills outside of the game? How are we going to make game-based learning into real-world skills? So that's really what we've been doing at Learning Works for Kids, and that's why we're trying so hard to help parents of kids with ADHD to be able to do that, because unfortunately, most of even the great games out there don't do that directly. We need mediators. We need parents to help us make that connection. And you can see this slide has connect, where it's all about connecting what's happening in the game and making something happen in the real world. So let me talk a little bit about what we know about games and learning. There's an increasing amount of research on this. When I first started looking into this 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot about video games and learning. We could look at play and learning. We could sometimes see some stuff about board games and learning, but there wasn't a whole lot of information about video games and learning. And now we know about it. We know that, you know, games can promote learning and apps can promote learning. The way we look at it at Learning Works for Kids is that we see that there's certain kinds of games that directly impact learning. So, for example, some academic games. One of the things I'll talk about later is the website called BrainPop. BrainPop has all these kind of learning games and all these kinds of tools for kids to learn directly, and then learning academic skills directly. We also look at games as opportunities to practice skills. So, for example, if we go back to looking at Minecraft, we can see how Minecraft, when a kid is playing, requires that they use planning skills. They'll oftentimes need to be flexible. They'll have to knock things down and put things up again. So they'll use skills, and so they're practicing those skills in the game, not necessarily happening outside of the game, but in the game. Apps, on the other hand, oftentimes help support skills. So, for example, scheduling apps, calendar apps, an app like Evernote are apps that can support like weak cognitive skills or weak executive functioning skills. So we oftentimes will recommend those kinds of apps. But the key thing for using apps with kids is that if you want to use apps to help ADHD kids, you're really going to teach them how to use the app and how to apply the app. Okay, having it on your cell phone doesn't do you much good. Learning how to use it and using it on a regular basis is what it's about. There's been some early research that looks at how do specific games help kids with ADHD with academics. These are old studies that are actually being revisited now. Two of my dear friends actually were involved in this. Gary Stoner did a study on kids with ADHD looking at the game Headsprout, which is now called Mimeo, I believe, and how it improved the reading of kids with ADHD more than traditional reading teaching did. George DePaul did a study with an old game called Math Blaster, for those of you who are old enough to remember that, and demonstrated how, again, the kids with ADHD improved with math, but also increased their focus when using these games. So there's lots of other ways that games can help learning. There's been studies conducted by the Harvard Business School that finds that people who took leadership roles in World of Warcraft were more likely to be good leaders in a real work situation. we've done some studies at Learning Works for Kids where once we identified a child's specific executive functioning weakness, we were able to prescribe a set of games and activities for the child to do that improve that specific executive functioning skill. There was a study done on the game StarCraft that indicated that it improves kids' cognitive flexibility. So we're seeing all kinds of ways that games can improve learning. And specifically, there are other things that look at other thinking skills as well. So games can improve processing speed as well. There's been a whole bunch of studies done by Sean Green and Daphne Bavelier, which you can see on the top piece, the increasing processing speed. They've done a series of studies looking at action-based games that can improve processing speed. Working memory studies have been done predominantly around the tool CogMed. And again, many of these studies indicate that these short video games can improve both visual, spatial, and verbal working memory. So we see a lot of games that can improve these skills. Now, there are concerns, okay, and legitimate concerns about this. We know that kids who spend too much time in front of a screen are more likely to be obese. Most of this is based upon television studies, not about studies done with video games. One of the most interesting studies was done by Andrew Shabilsky, who's a psychologist over in the United Kingdom. What he found out was that kids who played video games for more than 3 hours a day showed a deterioration in their academic performance and in their social emotional functioning. He also found that the healthiest kids in terms of their school performance and their social emotional functioning were kids who played video games for an hour a day. Those kids were actually healthier and did better in school than the kids who didn't play at all. Now that might seem strange to you, but if you think about it, you'll recognize that it's something that they can share with other kids. Playing for an hour a day probably reflects that there's some balance in what they're doing. They're not sitting in front of a screen all day. They're more typical kids. So that, you know, we can see that a little bit of video games can be helpful. I mean, games are cognitively challenging. The games that your kids like are not easy games that they beat in the span of 30 minutes. They're the games that they play for hours and hours and engage in because they're cognitively challenged. They're making their brain work in a way that they like. Video game addiction, important issue. Less likely to happen here in the U.S. than in some of the Southeast Asian countries, but we're beginning to see more and more about that. Now, one of the issues is that we know that by definition, kids with ADHD and adults with ADHD are more likely to have some type of addictive disorders. That those kinds of things are more likely to happen. So we need to take some special cautions for kids who have ADHD, kids on the spectrum as well. So part of what I wanted to do today is talk about why the summer is such an important time for playing video games, but more importantly, for doing other kinds of things and developing new habits. Why is the summer such an important time for kids with ADHD? One of the things I routinely talk about in my practice with families that come here is I say, do not let your kid take the summer off from learning, okay? Many kids with ADHD who may have learning issues and other concerns will fall behind. People have written numerous articles and there's great research on what we call the summer slump, that kids leave school in June and come back in September behind their peers, particularly those kids with learning and attentional issues. So the summer is really an opportunity to work on things. Interestingly enough, it also gives you enough time to build a habit. There's some pretty cool research that indicates that you need about 66 days. Now, obviously, this varies depending upon the habit and other kinds of things, but you need about 66 days in order to build a habit. Well, guess what? Summer vacation is about 66 days. And if I had to tell you the one habit I would like to build in every kid with ADHD, it would be that they exercised every day. And if you want to get enthusiastic about this, go get a copy of John Rady's book Spark, okay? And that's Spock in Rhode Island. It has an A and R and a K in it. It's not like Dr. Spock from Star Trek. In Rhode Island, we speak a little bit differently. But get that book, and you can read about many of the studies, and it's very well written too. It's not a scientific book. It's really meant for lay people. It really helps you to see the importance of exercise and how it can help kids with ADHD. What it essentially does is exercise improves and increases the amount of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or brain protein in our brain, that helps us to be able to focus better, and it also helps with stress management as well. So, and Rady talks about how you need vigorous physical exercise, but he also talks about another form of exercise that can be very helpful for kids with ADHD, which is exercise that involves complex body movement. That could be karate, that could be dance. So those kinds of exercises have been demonstrated to help kids with ADHD. Rady's study is, I don't want to get too much into Rady's studies, but basically what he did is he compared a group of 100 kids with learning and attention issues who got vigorous physical exercise before school to a group of kids who didn't, and the effects were dramatic. And I encourage you to go read the study on your own. I'm going to show you a couple of slides here, but I'm going to jump through these real quickly, because the point I'm really trying to make here is that exercise is so vitally important to kids with ADHD. It helps kids to improve. It helps kids to improve executive functioning skills. Exercise has been demonstrated to help kids improve working memory skills. There's data that suggests that it helps with cognitive flexibility, self-regulation skills. It's not just making your kid tired. It's not just kind of getting your kid to get his or her energy out. It's not that. It's really a whole lot more. It's changing brain chemistry. It's a fantastic thing to do, and the summer is an opportunity to do it. In terms of developing a habit, I don't have time to get into that today. I recently wrote an article that you could find at tokaboka.com. They make Tokaboka games on using exercise, building the exercise habit during the summer. I don't know if the article is up yet. I actually haven't checked, but it will be up. If it's not up, it'll be up shortly. I encourage you to take a look at that. It'll give you some real good ideas about how to actually make this happen, because making something into a habit is not the easiest thing in the world to do, as all of us know. But if you can get your kids to exercise over the course of the summer and keep them doing that, it may be one of the single best things that you can possibly do for a child with ADHD. And here's another slide, again, just telling you even brief amounts of exercise have been demonstrated to help kids improve executive functioning skills. So there's some pretty compelling data here. All right, so I'm here to talk to you about games and technology, not so much about exercise, not so much about building habits. How can you use games and technology to do that, okay? So on the one hand, if you want to be a skeptic, you can say, well, you're going to tell us to just let the kids play video games and sit in front of a screen all day? No, not at all. But there are lots of ways to use technologies to help kids in these areas. But, and this is the big but, the but is that it won't generally happen naturally. There are a couple of things that seem to happen naturally. For example, kids who play sports-based video games, like playing soccer or basketball games, tend to go outside and play those games more. That's just how it is. The data may be correlational, but we see these kids actually increasing the amount of time that they go out and play those games. But the big but here is that it means that parents, teachers, whoever, caretakers, you need to make this happen. You need to be involved with this. It's not going to happen on its own. And it certainly won't happen if you as a parent are spending most of your time in front of the screen as well. So one of the things that you really need to do is you need to become active in this. So if we're going to do something, for example, let's take the nature and animal TV shows and videos. One of the things that I encourage parents to do with their kids is to let them watch, and they're a great show, watch some nature and animal shows on TV. If you can, find some that might relate to the area that you live in, that might encourage the kids to want to go out. If you live near the ocean, watching stuff about fish and shells and sharks and stuff like that, and going out in the ocean and going and trying to discover, and walking and exploring can be helpful. Using fitness trackers and smartwatches, that's another tool that you can use. Again, though, give your kid a fitness tracker, that's probably not going to do anything other than they might say, oh, I took 5,000 steps today. if you can engage in some type of competition amongst family members to see who takes the most steps in a day or a week, and that person gets to pick out the restaurant you're going to go to, or a movie that you're going to rent, that could be helpful. So you have to find ways to make that happen. Exercise and yoga videos, those are fantastic. There's so many of those on YouTube and other places. I mean, it's just fantastic. As an old guy now, I'm starting to do more yoga. So that's the way I do it. Is I watch yoga videos. I sit in my workout room and I do that. And by the way, I'm talking here about exercise, and I do want to say this. I'm giving myself a pat on the back for being an old man here. As I exercise 6 or 7 days a week, not nearly as hard as I used to, but because I really believe in it. So when I tell parents and kids to do this, I'm not just telling them it's a good thing to do. I know it's a good thing to do. And it helps with all kinds of things in your life, whether you have ADHD or not. So kind of doing these kinds of things is super important. Here's some other ways and other thoughts about this. Pokemon Go, which was the rage last summer, less so this summer, but it certainly requires that you be active. I mean, I saw lots of families were coming into my office last year, and there happened to be a lot of Pokemons in the playground that's next to my office. So they would be out there walking and exploring. Some parents were talking to me about how if they went at a certain pace riding their bikes with their kids, they could find more Pokemon Go's that way. So Pokemons that way. So they would do that. It was wonderful for increasing exercise. Digital cameras. What a terrific idea to get your kids outside, going on a nature walk, taking pictures, taking videos. Kids love taking videos, posting those videos. So again, you're using that technology to get kids to get outside and do something with it. You're encouraging them to make something of their technology while they're outdoors exercising. Fidget spinners. Well, I'm not so sure about fidget spinners. Do they work? Is there any evidence that they work? So one good thing I can tell you is that I have agreed to work on, and I've been working on this actually, to write an article for Attitude Magazine, and hopefully it'll be up shortly, on fidget spinners. And I've been doing a whole bunch of research on it, both in terms of the actual literature, the psychological literature on, there's not too much literature on fidget spinners per se, but on movement and other kinds of activities. And then I've been conducting my own qualitative surveys. So I've talked to probably about, maybe 12, 15 kids at this point, and I probably will have about 20 before I'm done, who use the fidget spinners, and talk to them about it. All I can tell you is that most of the kids, when I talk to them and I ask them, do the fidget spinners help you to focus? They tell me, not really. So wouldn't include those in terms of an outdoor activity or exercise at this point. So as I was saying before, the summer is really this great opportunity to do things with kids with ADHD because you have so much time to do it. And in my practice with kids with ADHD, I've identified a few things that I find to be really, really important to work on, because that takes some time to develop over the course of the summer. In fact, one of the things that we're doing in our office, and we're actually doing through LearningWorks for Kids as well, so if people are interested in this, they can contact me through LearningWorks for Kids, or you'll have my email address and I can explain this to you. We're going to be training kids on the use of specific technologies and apps to improve specific skills. So for example, one of the things that we do in the office, so we do it face-to-face in the office and we do it via Skype for other people who come to us with LearningWorks for Kids, is we're teaching them how to use the note-taking app Notability, which is fantastic for kids who have working memory difficulties, who have some difficulties with slow processing speed. And I've been writing an awful lot about processing speed on our website as well. It's one of the topics that I see happen that occurs with a lot of kids with ADHD. And we're trying to figure out what can we do to not just make accommodations for kids with processing speed issues, but what are some of the strategies that we can use to help them to improve their processing speed. So it's a topic of great interest to me that I write about frequently, but I also we're trying to find ways to use technology to help with that. Notability is a tool that a child can actually put on their iPad, their laptop, whatever. They can record a lecture. They can be taking notes. They can come back later into those notes, click on a particular part in the notes, and listen to what maybe they missed because they couldn't keep up with it due to working memory issues, because of slowness in their processing as well. Another thing that I think is incredibly important for kids with ADHD is teaching them either to become great typists, and even better yet, to teach them dictation skills. Again, I'll go back to this idea that we need mediators to help to make these things happen. There's parents and teachers, but we also need to teach kids how to use apps. We can't just give them an app. Virtually every smartphone has a dictation app. If you've got an iPhone, you can use Siri to do all kinds of things. I do most of my writing of drafts, you know, right on my Google Drive with my iPhone. But we need to teach kids how to dictate. So again, this is another set of lessons that we're doing via LearningWorks for Kids, doing in our office, where we actually teach kids the skills of dictation. How do we teach them not just to talk into something, but how do we teach them to talk in sentences? How do we teach them to brainstorm? So when they have to write a book report, rather than sitting in front of their piece of paper and scrunching it up because they can't come up with anything, or they write something and then they cross it out, we teach them to just generate a list of ideas. We teach them how to do that via dictation, and then how to transform that into an essay. We teach them how to, you know, speak in prose as opposed to in conversation. So, and by teaching the kids those skills, they're still not going to be great at dictating after 5 or 6 weeks of trying this, but they'll get the hang, and for some kids, it's a lifesaver. We do a brief little lesson with them where we have a little contest. They have to write something, and we have to dictate the same little paragraph. We demonstrate to them that, well, we can dictate that paragraph in 40 seconds while it's taking them 5 minutes to write it. And they kind of say, you know what, boy, that could save me a lot of time. Lots of other apps could be very helpful for kids to learn about this summer for kids with ADHD. Quizlet is a great one. I mentioned BrainPop earlier. BrainPop is just a lot of fun for kids with ADHD. It's a great source of learning. There's all kinds of content there, and the kids really, they really like it. Few other apps here. Dragon Quest Builder is another game like Minecraft, so that could be helpful. Text for stress management and mindfulness. So one of the apps that we're teaching kids to use in the office is an app called Calm, C-A-L-M, and that can be helpful for many kids with ADHD. We know that they also have stress-related issues as well. So these are all kinds of things that I think can be very helpful. And again, you've got the summer, you have time to do it. Let's talk a little about games for creativity and social skills as well. So we talked about Pokemon Go already, and we actually talked about digital cameras. Although digital cameras, another whole component to that is the idea of how many kids who like watching videos also like creating videos. And there's so much creativity that comes into making videos. And again, if we can get parents involved, there's also a social component to it. Think about a child making a video that they want someone else to watch. They need to understand what other people will take from it, what other people are going to be interested in. So it really requires a great deal of social awareness. Another set of apps and games that can be very helpful for creativity are cooking apps and TV shows. I have noticed, I would say, 100% increase in kids with ADHD or other kids that come to my office in their interest in cooking in the last maybe 3 years. I attribute it primarily to some of the cooking shows that are out there on TV, but it's amazing. One of the things I do on a routine basis when kids come into my office is I ask the parents, because we're talking about their problems, I say to them, tell me about your kids' strengths. What do they love to do? And I hear about cooking all the time. So cooking is a great opportunity for being creative. It's really a wonderful opportunity to also take care of your health in some ways, which we know is really important for kids with ADHD as well. And we'll go back to the old standby, Minecraft. It's really there. It's a great game. It's a wonderful opportunity for learning in the summer, as long as you can set your limits on it. And this is just before I get to the limits, I'm just real quickly talk. I've really talked about all these kinds of things before. That this is basically all about the need for parents to get involved. You know, we do much of that as much as we can on the LearningWorks for Kids website, where we actually have games. We call them Play Now games, where the kids watch a video that tells them the executive functioning skill they're going to use the game, then they play the game. But as much as you can, I think that it really involves that if your kids are involved with technology, you got to be involved. You got to learn about what they're doing. You got to see how can you transform that game-based learning into real-world skills. But you may have to set limits. So in the summer, kids have more free time. Should they have more screen time? Well, I would say this: if they got more free time and they're doing other things, if they're more active outdoors, if they're going to camp, if they're doing other things, giving them a little bit more screen time than you might normally would be important. My basic concept around setting screen time limits is what I call a play diet. In fact, that's going to be the main theme of my newest book. I'm working on my newest book called Too Much Minecraft, and the subtitle has balancing and healthy play diets for kids. But the idea is that play diets involve kids having a good balance of play. Digital play is a part of their play, but social play, physical play, unstructured play, and creative play all need to be part of that. Another way that you can set screen time limits is you can curate the content. You can choose the content. All screen time is not alike. There's some screen time that's really pretty good for kids. There's other screen time that's horrible for kids. You can also use apps and tools to restrict screen time. To restrict screen time. So one of them is an app called Screen Time, another called Habits. Both are really good for kids with ADHD. They are wonderful tools, I think, to help parents to reduce some of the arguments and conflicts that parents will have with kids around screen time. So this is a slide on the play diet, and you know, if I can emphasize this a little bit more, if at an early age you can help a child have a healthy play diet, and by the way, that means that you as parents need to have some kind of healthy play diet as well. If you spend all your time in front of a screen or all your time working, and because play is important for adults as well, there's not going to be much balance there. So the idea here is that we have some proportionality in this, but that we don't eliminate digital play because we think it's bad. In fact, it's not bad. It's just too much of it is a problem because it takes away from other forms of play. So it's a little bit like exercising just one part of your body. And so we try to really work very hard to do that. To the degree that can do to set a healthy play diet, your kids are going to just do better. This is a quick guide for screen time, and the guide is primarily for what I would call recreational screen time. As you already know, your kids are doing much of their homework on screens, a lot of their communication with their peers. They don't get on the phone anymore. They text. I mean, try and make a phone call to a teenager. They won't pick it up. If you text them, they'll immediately respond to you. So, you know, so screen time for kids is a little bit different than it used to be. So this guide for screen time is really primarily around recreational screen time. We've kind of created you can actually, if you can download this at our website in a PDF form, and it's really designed to help you recognize the developmental features of screen time as well. As kids get older, they need more screen time. They need to be more in charge of what they're doing. They need a little bit more independence and autonomy as well. Okay, so I guess I'm going to stop here, Susan.
Oh, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hi. So great, thanks, Randy, so much. I want to come back to this, your recommendation on exercise, and I wanted to ask the listeners to post any questions they have about how to encourage exercise in their children, or what their own personal dilemma might be about that topic. What is keeping your child from exercising? And I want to come back to Randy to let you explain a bit more about, or can you give an example of a child who, through your center, began to exercise more and how you accomplished that? So practically, how parents should go about getting their kids outdoors and exercising more.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So, I mean, the first thing is, like I said, parents need to be involved, and you know, they have to feel as if this is a really good thing. I mean, sometimes when I do this, what I say to the parents is I say, this is the opportunity for you to do the same thing. So, you know, and I will give them some specific suggestions, such as, for example, taking a walk before dinner time or after dinner time if they can. So I think that to the degree that the parents get involved in doing it's important. Joining a gymnasium, we talk about that kind of stuff all the time as well. So I try to get parents, again, the parents need to be involved, and you also need to be practical about what's going on with exercise. So in Rhode Island, where we live here, like the idea of saying, okay, well, we're going to become bicyclists. Well, you can bicycle maybe 6 months a year. And that is if you're willing to brave, April and November. But so that's not going to work totally. So you have to find some ways to have indoor exercise, getting it, and again, parents need to be involved because they might need to buy an indoor exercise bike or a treadmill. Many kids with ADHD I find love to go swimming. I don't know if it's just a sensory piece of that, but it's not practical unless you happen to have your own pool or can get to the YMCA all the time. So it has to be, I talk to parents about the importance of sort of cross training. Again, another recommendation I make frequently is using exercise videos. Some of those videos are great for encouraging people to exercise and to do that, and you can do that in your home. So a lot of it is about how do you make it happen? How do you make it easy? I know this, not just as a psychologist, but I know this as a person. I know that part of what happens for me in order to exercise regularly is I sometimes come home from the office and I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted and sometimes physically exhausted. I'm fortunate enough to have a really nice exercise bike and an elliptical in my basement, and I've learned that I can read novels when I do that, so I can buy that, and I tell parents the same thing. If your kids need music, do that. So, having this stuff accessible, making it somehow engaging and interesting, because so many people say it's boring. Well, how can you do that? And again, technology can help with that. So for example, listening to a book on tape and going for a walk or running is something that I'll recommend. Podcasts, you guys, the Attitude has podcasts. I sometimes listen to some of the Attitude podcasts when I'm doing some exercise because it's a way for me to learn and exercise at the same time. So I'm making use of that time. So there's a lot of things you can do. I would say there's not one thing that fits all kids or families.
I've got some great comments here from the listeners. One person says we found Cosmic Kids Yoga. Cosmic Kids Yoga. I guess maybe it's a tape to be really wonderful. Yeah. Another person says that their family takes walks as a family before dinner or after dinner. So there's some good suggestions. That said, there are a number of people who say my child just is resistant. The Cosmic Kids person posted that it's available on YouTube, so there's a good one for you. So people say their kid refuses, doesn't want to leave the house. I can sort of empathize with what they're saying. Any suggestions? It sounds to me, Randy, from what you're saying, that you're suggesting, A, that parents model this behavior, and B, it sounds like starting younger would be good rather than waiting until a child's a teenager to bring in exercise. Might be tougher at that point.
Susan, you're absolutely right. Those things are certainly true. I might say if the child is that oppositional, that you might want to try to do a little bit of family therapy to kind of work on that issue, less so than than the exercise. But that's one thing. But sometimes you need to incentivize this. So one of the things that I suggest is, for example, if you can get the other family members involved and you have fitness trainers or you have set goals, that you do things in the home where nobody's a failure, but you want to participate because you want to have, you're keeping track of this. One of the kids can do this online and on a spreadsheet where they can kind of show who's doing what. Finding, I think, again, if you can find a way to make it more interesting and engaging, that can be helpful. Audiobooks to me I see a lot of people who are walking, not listening to music, but they're listening to books because they're just engaged. So even, just the idea.
Great podcast now, yeah.
Yeah, there's so I think you really have to work at it because, my take here is how can we maybe, I'm saying to you, exercise is great, but I'm not the expert on exercise and ADHD. There's a lot of people who know all about that stuff, and and the research, like I said, is compelling. I put up a whole pile of slides, and I had a whole lot more, but I didn't want to bore people with. But the idea of using technology as a new tool for this, I think, is something that you can try.
Okay. What's your feeling about using screen time as a privilege there's a clinician on the webinar who specializes in ADHD, and he recommends telling parents to use access to digital media as a privilege that can be met only by meeting whatever expectations the parent have. One person says, how about restricting screen time until they complete the exercise? What's your feeling on that?
So, okay, so this is a question that I've been asked many times in many different ways, not quite this way before. My feeling is that we don't want to make all screen time into privilege. We don't want all screen time to be dessert. Okay, it's like you can have your dessert after you finish your dinner. I think that some screen time is not dessert. Some screen time is a cognitively challenged kid. Some screen time is to have something to share with your peers. Some screen time is to communicate with your peers. So my recommendation around this is that, that the kids have at least some modest amount of screen time. Now that might vary based upon how you want to do this, but I think that to paint screen time as sort of like, oh, this is just some kind of extra thing and not part of a life, is to put it in a negative light that unfortunately I think people have had for many years, and I just don't think that's necessary. I understand why people choose to do this, because it's incredibly rewarding and very powerful. So, but what I'm suggesting essentially is that you can still make it rewarding. If the kid really wants to be on screen time, you might reduce it from an hour a day to a half an hour a day and say you can earn another 45 minutes a day or even another hour a day when you do this and that.
So not having it be absolute. There's an interesting suggestion here from Kyla, who says, our families had great success using a collaborative problem-solving approach regarding refusing to do things. Kids with ADHD can be chronically inflexible, and we found that planning the daily schedule together in advance so the child can see when they have screen time or other activity curbs a lot of the refusal or meltdown. So I guess the concept here is plan out the day, and there's so much exercise, so much screen time, so much whatever. And heading off the refusal that way. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds, I mean, the stuff that Ross Green has done, and I'm blocking on co-author's name. Why am I blocking this co-author's name?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Ross Green.
Yeah. ThinkKids.org is a really good site for looking at that kind of oppositional behavior for people who want to go take a look at that. But he wrote The Explosive Child, and
he's amazing.
It's on my bookshelf here. You can't find it. There's too many books here to find. Yeah, no, absolutely. So listeners are quite intrigued with the concept of using apps for processing speed and working memory, and wondered if you could elaborate somewhat on that topic. Sure. So think about it this way for just a minute. I'm not necessarily saying that we're going to use apps that the app itself is going to make the kid be better at processing information across the board. I'm talking about using an app as a pair of glasses that will help he or she to do better. So, for example, dictation is an incredible opportunity to improve processing speed when it comes to writing once you learn how to do it. Same thing with making a kid an extremely competent typist. Now, there is some data that says that certain types of action video games can improve processing speed and can help with that kind of stuff. My guess is, and this is purely a guess because I don't think we have data on this, although there's a series of studies that suggest this, but my guess is that it improves processing speed very modestly. But it can. But I'm saying that we use apps to support weak skills because the app itself allows us to go faster. Same thing with working memory skills. When we think about working memory skills, a lot of times kids with working memory skills can't keep too many things in their mind. Well, they can certainly use their smartphones to do that. Now, again, there are apps, or in this case, things like cognitive working memory training. And my guess would be that Play Attention. I don't know quite enough about Play Attention, but Play Attention would be another tool that could improve that same type of skill by improving those kind of cognitive processes. That's going to be likely to be able to improve a little bit of processing speed, a little bit of working memory. Keep in mind that part of what goes on with kids who have difficulties with processing speed and working memory issues is that sometimes they're not totally paying attention. So when they're not paying attention, it's harder to do that. You know, like I was saying before, I've written a whole series of articles. I almost feel like writing a book about processing speed. Over the last,
I think it's pretty misunderstood as a key issue with ADHD, right?
Yeah, it really is, and it's like, and so we're looking at the things like the causes of slow processing speed and strategies that parents and teachers can use, and actually stuff for kids as well to kind of help them to understand it, because a lot of times kids don't understand it. My biggest concern as a clinician who works with kids with slow processing speed is the low self-esteem. They tend to really beat themselves up. They call themselves stupid and dumb because they just don't do their work as fast as other kids, and they may be able to do it even better than the other kids. They just don't do it as fast. So that's really upsetting when I hear that.
It is. Well, that's the key issue for so many kids with ADHD, is internalizing that there's something wrong with them. A suggestion here from a listener, and I think it's an app called Safe Family, which she said is working really well for them as a screen time and monitor. Do you have any other thoughts on the question of using technology to manage screen time?
I think for some families it's fantastic, and I think that a lot of times it avoids many arguments. It's something that can be done jointly with your kids so that there's an agreement. A lot of times your kids will say, okay, I get it, you want me to do other things, but then they're in the middle of something, and at that point their irritability and their difficulty in transitioning gets totally in the way of being able to shift and change that. I mean, we know that kids with ADHD don't shift very well from one thing to another. Sometimes kids with ADHD don't have problems paying attention, they have problems shifting attention. So having a tool like that takes the parent out of it is really helpful. I don't know that particular one. We're actually in the process of writing a series of posts on this around just not so much reviewing each and every app, but there are many apps out there. The ones that I mentioned, Screen Time and Habits, are ones that I know something about. I've talked to the developers. I know why they developed and how they work, and I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there. I'm sure there are many other real good ones as well. We'll review a bunch of them and can share those with you if you want. We can share them with the audience.
Okay, great. I'm very intrigued by your description of helping kids learn to dictate as a way to speed up writing. I think that absolutely is inspired, frankly, because everyone speaks more fluently than they write in many cases. Can you speak further about encouraging kids to write more effectively? It seems it's something that many people listening in are interested in, and it's certainly something we hear a tremendous amount about, attitude from teachers and parents both. Helping with writing skills.
Yeah. So what we did here in my clinical practice, and what we're doing this summer on LearnWorks for Kids via Skype and Google Hangouts, is we're training kids to use dictation devices. We in the office we did a 4-session. We did a 4-session. 4 sessions of kind of training the kids, and it's very systematic in terms of teaching the kids first just basically to be able to talk into their phones, teaching them some basic skills about creating sentences and paragraphs and stuff like that, having them learn to dictate by reading stuff that they've already written into that, and then teaching them to speak in sentences and teaching them to kind of go from a series of sentences into some type of editing. So it's kind of a systematic approach to doing that. What we're finding, and what I hear all the time in my clinical work, is my kid's got great ideas. He can't get it on paper. So, and what happens, I think, for a lot of the kids is they don't even want to try to jot down their ideas on paper. They just want to, they wish it could be done, and so they avoid writing. It causes frustration. It causes a lot of fights at home. So I can tell you that. I think I hear more about fights when it comes to writing assignments than I do about anything else when it comes to the kids with ADHD and learning issues. So
really, yeah.
So that's sort of what we're doing. Susan, excuse me for saying this, I think it's an inspired idea too, because I just think that if we, that we should be thinking about that in terms of teaching kids writing skills.
Right.
But no one knows how to do that. If you go even onto the Nuance site, which are the people who develop Dragon Dictation, they don't have anything like that. if you want, I could share some stuff with about stuff that we've written about how to do that, because I just think that it's be so valuable for many kids with ADHD. I mean, 60% of kids with ADHD have some kind of writing issues. That's a huge amount of kids.
Yes. No, it's a very big thing. So, is there a specific tool, dictation software that you use that you like, that you think works best?
We're just using what we taught kids on was just using Siri on their iPhones.
Wow.
But it's not the dictation tool that's important. I mean, what we taught them to do is to use Siri in a Google document so that it's immediately on their computer. And it's so simple to do. It is the simplest thing, but it's not simple to learn to dictate properly. If you took a dictation of our conversation right now, it would be mumbo jumbo. It really would not make much sense. It would be, there'd be all these pauses. There wouldn't be any periods. There wouldn't be any form to it. So you have to teach kids to speak. So when I actually demonstrate it to kids in my office all the time, I will grab my cell phone and say, I am going to teach John how to use dictation skills, period. The first thing I want to show John is that he needs to be able to speak clearly, period. The next thing, and so but we have to teach kids to do that. So that's what we do.
Sure. That's interesting. Yeah. Question from someone who's intrigued by using Siri with a Google Doc. Can you explain a little bit about that? I think every Google Docs, which are so useful, are a bit mysterious to many people for obvious reasons.
If they have Drive on their phone, I'm doing it right now, okay? If they simply go to their Google Drive on their phone, okay, and they want to create a document, they push this little plus button on the bottom. It says Google Docs. You click on that. I mean, I'm not the best person to give tech advice, but I can do this one, okay? I go to the Google Docs, okay? And at this point, on my keypad, there's a little microphone towards the bottom left next to the space bar. If I simply push that microphone, I start talking into this. In this case, I would just be making the title of my document. Then I would click on that, and then I would just talk. It's really easy.
Huh. And so then the idea is that the child can then edit what appears there, right?
Well, yeah, but if you start with a conversation like what we're having, that's again where the training needs to come into place. Okay. You could talk, but talking is very different from dictating.
Okay, got it. All right, yep.
That's the part where training needs to take place, and that's the part that schools are missing. That's the part that most psychologists, I mean, up until the last couple of years, that's all I would do. I just say, oh, this kid would benefit from learning dictation skills, and I put it in my report, and that would be the end of it. And I realized that wasn't helping anybody. They needed to learn how to do it.
Learn. Got it. Okay. So everybody, we are so out of time. We're over, and this has just been so interesting, Randy. And I want to encourage everyone to help us with this new experiment of continuing this discussion, both sharing your own experiences and asking your questions on attitudemag.com/forums. If you scroll down on that page, you'll find a topic just for Attitude webinars and a topic just for this webinar with Randy Coleman. And so please log on, join, and post your questions there and help each other, share your own experiences, and ask questions, and Randy will check it and answer some questions in the next couple of days. So I'm really enthusiastic about seeing how this works. It's attitudemag.com/forums, and let's give it a try. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to download Randy's very helpful handout under handouts in your control panel. If you want to print this out, share it with others, it's there. You can also re-listen to this webinar on attitudemag.com/webinar. And that's it. Thanks to everyone. And thank you so much, Randy, for everything you've done, all the help that you've given so many parents on Attitude. It's been really great. So we appreciate it. And thank you to Play Attention, our sponsor. I'm trying to bring up our next webinar so I can see what it is, but I'm not seeing it. So just check back to attitudemag.com/webinar and see what's coming up, because there's some really great stuff this summer, all for kids and learning. Thanks, everybody. So I'm logging off. Talk to you soon.